People think betrayal starts in bedrooms. It doesn't. It starts at dinner tables, under chandeliers, with crystal glasses singing lies. I'm Morel Devane, and before you decide whether to hate or pity me, let me tell you something I learned too late. The most dangerous man isn't the one who hits you, it's the one who makes you feel foolish for ever trusting him. Tonight was Rashad's idea. A dinner. Just us and a few friends, he said, as if love could be polished back to life with tablecloth and wine. The house smelled of burnt sage and truffle butter, the kind of luxury that hides rot underneath. Langston, our chef of 12 years, moved like a ghost between courses. But when he leaned close to pour my drink, his hand trembled. Something small brushed my wrist, a folded napkin cornered tighter than fear. I palmed it beneath the table. When I unfolded it later under the candlelight, it read only, "He's ending something tonight." My stomach didn't drop. It didn't need to. I'd already ended something weeks ago, quietly, on paper. Rashad sat across from me, skin gleaming in the gold light, smile rehearsed to the millimeter. To his left sat his lawyer, Hollis Gray, smooth, sharp-eyed, the type who doesn't eat at these dinners. He just waits for signatures. And to Rashad's right, pretending to belong, was my sister, Sabria. She'd traded humility for emerald earrings and borrowed confidence. Her fingers tapped against her glass like she was counting down to something. Rashad cleared his throat. "Morel, darling, Hollis has brought a few housekeeping documents. Routine. Just making sure upholdings are properly streamlined." Streamlined. The word hung like a blade. I smiled, though. Always smile when the knife's on the table. "Routine, you say?" Hollis slid the leather folder toward me. No hesitation, no preamble. He must have thought I'd sign anything that looked official and smelled expensive. Inside were typed lines, crisp and cruel. Beneficial ownership adjustments. Consent of transfer. My name glittered in black ink where he wanted it. "Go on," Rashad coaxed, voice dripping in civility. "We're just simplifying for tax reasons. Less paperwork for you to worry about." "Tax reasons," I repeated, tracing the embossed header. The room was warm, but my hands were steady. My signature, the one he thought he controlled, was already inked elsewhere, on documents he'd never see until the world saw them first. Sabria smiled, finally exhaling. "You trust him, don't you, sis?" I looked at her then. Really looked at her. Her lipstick was the exact shade I used to wear before she borrowed it. The same color Rashad once said looked best against his skin. My voice came out low, steady. Of course I trust him. Langston appeared again, placing the final course between us. A tall white cake with gold-dusted edges. "A celebration," Rashad said smoothly, lifting his glass. "To partnership." Partnership. That was the word he chose. I took the pen Hollis handed me. The room seemed to inhale. I signed my name with a flourish, dotted the I like a woman who still believed in happy endings. Rashad's relief was visible. He exhaled, shoulders dropping, smile widening. "There," he said softly. "Done." I raised my glass, let it touch his, and said, "To partnership." The sound of crystal meeting crystal was sharp enough to break something unseen. Across the table, Sabria's eyes glowed with victory. Rashad kissed her knuckles like a man thanking fate. Langston's note still burned in my palm, and beneath the linen, I traced its edge. "He's ending something tonight." He was right. He just didn't know it wasn't mine. They say money polishes people. That's a lie. Money just teaches cruelty better manners. Rashad had perfected it. The art of destroying a person with etiquette. No shouting, no slam doors, just a smile wide enough to make you doubt yourself. That was his real weapon. Before that dinner, before the paper, I'd spent years pretending his kindness wasn't cutting me open. I used to think silence was grace. Turns out, silence just made me easier to choreograph. It was the winter of the Hale Foundation Gala, 3 years before everything unraveled. I remember the weight of the silk gown he chose for me. champagne-colored, too tight around the ribs. He said it photographed well. The museum lights danced across marble floors, and the air smelled of champagne and caution. Everyone was watching him, not us. Rashad liked it that way. He'd been named Humanitarian of the Year. Funny title for a man who measured generosity in receipts. I was scheduled to give the closing remarks. A simple thank you, a few words about legacy and giving back. Rashad had approved my script days earlier, but on stage, in front of donors and cameras, he took the microphone first. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, my wife will try to say something charming, but don't expect much. She's better at shopping than speaking." Laughter rolled across the room, polite, uncertain, cruel. The kind of laughter people use when they're too rich to look offended. My hand froze around the note cards. That's how his insults worked, wrapped in humor, disguised as love. I smiled. That was my reflex then. Smile and survive. When I walked to the podium, I saw Deacon standing at the back, near the sculpture exhibit. He looked bored, half drunk, exactly as he was supposed to. He'd been Rashad's business partner for a decade, the kind of man everyone trusted but never understood. He didn't clap. He just watched. I delivered my speech perfectly, voice steady, though my heart pounded like a trapped bird. When I stepped off stage, Rashad kissed my cheek for the photographers, whispering, "Next time, stay on script." Then he walked away to shake hands with a senator. I remember standing by the massive bronze statue of a woman carrying a basin, her face tired but proud. That's when Deacon appeared beside me. He didn't say a word at first, just handed me a folded napkin from the catering table. "You missed a tear," he murmured. I laughed, too quietly for the cameras. "You don't even like me." He glanced toward Rashad across the room. "I don't like watching smart people humiliate themselves for free." I looked at him, startled. His voice was calm, measured. No sympathy, just observation. "Keep every receipt, even for kindness. It'll matter someday." Then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd like nothing happened. That was the first time I realized Deacon saw more than he ever said. The next morning, I found a single envelope slid under my study door, an invitation to lunch, embossed with the Hale Holdings logo. It wasn't from Rashad. When we met, Deacon talked about markets and politics, never marriage. But he left his tablet face up once, showing a private chat between him and a Cayman consultant. Rashad's name appeared 3 times beside the word transfer. I said nothing. Neither did he. But that was the first spark of quiet rebellion between us. The moment silence became strategy. For months after, I played Rashad's game, hosting brunches, attending functions, smiling for photographs while he rehearsed charm for strangers. Each event chipped away at something I once believed sacred. Politeness became my mask, but under it, I was documenting every bruise of condescension, every routine insult, every check he signed that wasn't his to spend. I used to think marriage was built on love, but that night at the museum, under the weight of applause that didn't belong to either of us, I realized something else. Marriage, for men like Rashad, was built on ownership, and ownership could be rewritten. People saw Deacon Vance as Rashad's shadow, cold, unreadable, and loyal to a fault. That was the irony. The man Rashad trusted most was the one person who knew exactly how to dismantle him. In public, Deacon treated me like I was invisible. He was consistent about it too. Never too polite, never too harsh. Just dismissive enough to keep suspicion asleep. Rashad loved it. He thought it meant Deacon saw me the same way he did. Ornamental, replaceable. What he never realized was that Deacon's indifference was a language, one only I understood. The night everything began shifting, Rashad hosted a private investor dinner at our penthouse. Men with money and women with practiced smiles floated through the room like perfume. I played the role Rashad wrote for me: beautiful, obedient, irrelevant. My job was to laugh at jokes I didn't find funny and look grateful to be tolerated. Deacon arrived late, wearing that slate gray suit that made him look like he'd been born in boardrooms. He gave Rashad a half embrace, then looked at me as though I were air. It was deliberate. He kept that performance flawless. When the others drifted toward the terrace, I slipped away to Rashad's study under the excuse of refreshing myself. I'd memorized the passcode months earlier. His ego made it easy. 1109, his birth month and year. Inside, the room hummed with quiet greed. Mahogany desk, humidors, and rows of imported wine Rashad pretended to understand. I opened his locked drawer using a copied key and found what I came for: a small black flash drive labeled Lionfish. Rashad was arrogant enough to keep physical backups of his offshore ledgers, Cayman accounts tied to shell companies that would expose the empire for what it really was: a pyramid built on borrowed trust. Deacon's voice startled me. "You shouldn't be in here." I turned, hiding the drive under a folder. His tone was sharp, Deacon sharp, but his eyes flicked once, downward, then to the record shelf. It was enough. He closed a door behind him and raised his voice, making sure anyone outside could hear. "Rashad will think you're snooping again." I matched his tone. "And you'll run to tell him, won't you?" "Of course I will," he said evenly. "I always do." He walked toward the wall of vinyls and pulled out Blue Train, a vintage Coltrane Rashad kept for show, never touched. Deacon handed it to me. "He asked me to return this to you. It's yours, isn't it?" I took the record, slid the flash drive into the sleeve, and handed it back. Our fingers didn't even brush. There was no smile, no softness, just precision. Minutes later, when Rashad re-entered, Deacon was already scolding me. "You should stay out of his files, Morel. Some curiosities don't end well." Rashad smirked, satisfied by what looked like reprimand. Later that night, when the guests were gone and Rashad passed out on the couch, I checked my phone. One new message from an unknown number. Filed. Timestamp: 9:47 p.m. No signature, but I didn't need one.
That single text carried more safety than any promise Rashad had ever made. It meant the files were encrypted, duplicated, and stored in the Hale Holdings cloud system under Deacon's authority, hidden beneath a series of dummy corporate reports. If Rashad ever tried to erase his tracks, he'd trip over his own data. The next morning, Rashad complained about his missing record. "I told Deacon to bring it back," he said. "You left it in the wrong place." "I'm sure he'll find it," I replied. Rashad laughed. "That man never loses anything." And he was right. Deacon never lost anything. Not data, not control, not the plan. From that night on, our alliance lived in plain sight, camouflaged by his sarcasm and my silence. Every insult Rashad threw at me, Deacon countered with another layer of protection. Every cruel joke at a business brunch gave us cover to pass a look, a word, a file. He became the mask Rashad wore without realizing it, and behind that mask we were building his undoing, one document, one timestamp, one routine paper at a time. The morning after Rashad's investor dinner, the penthouse smelled of stale bourbon and pride. He was still asleep on the couch, phone face down, the kind of man who trusted passwords more than people. I watched him breathe, slow, heavy, unbothered, and wondered how many lies could fit inside one chest. Then I picked up my purse, slipped on the same heels I'd worn the night before, and left. Deacon had texted only 3 words: registry, today, alone. Hale Holdings' legal office sat 2 floors below the firm's own development branch, a place Rashad rarely visited in person. He preferred to dictate over the phone. Too busy, too important. That arrogance had become my window. If he never set foot here, he'd never notice what changed. The elevator doors opened to a hallway that smelled faintly of paper dust and copier ink. Behind a glass partition sat a woman whose face carried the kind of calm you earn by outlasting chaos. Her badge read, Odessa Brink, Senior Registrar. She looked up, then tilted her head. "You're a Devane." "I'm Morel Devane," I said, sliding the folder across. "I need to record a transfer under Hale Holdings' beneficiary structure." She opened the folder, eyes narrowing not at the content, but at my signature. "Devane," she repeated slowly. "Your father ever go by Eli Devane?" I nodded, startled. "He did. You knew him?" She smiled, faint and distant. "He was the only man who ever brought coffee for the whole department. Always said, 'Never file second, it means you're already losing.'" The way she said it, half memory, half warning, tightened something in my chest. I leaned in. "Then you'll understand why I'm here." Odessa flipped through the documents: trust formation papers, assignment of membership interest, notarized transfer stamps, every piece precisely dated, notarized, legitimate. Deacon's name appeared nowhere, only the trust, Hale Legacy Trust, managed by Devane Holdings. "Purpose?" she asked quietly. "Asset protection, personal and philanthropic." Her brows lifted. "Your husband aware?" "He will be, but not today." For a long moment, Odessa studied me, woman to woman, no titles, no wealth in between. Then she pushed her glasses higher and said, "Your father warned me about men who file first. Let's make sure you're the one who stamps first." She stood, her chair creaking softly, and walked the folder to the back counter. Each sound became a heartbeat: the slide of paper, the thud of a seal, the mechanical buzz of the registry scanner. When she returned, she placed a single stamped page in front of me. Across the bottom in deep blue ink, Hale Legacy Trust, irrevocable. The word hit harder than I expected. Irrevocable, permanent. Rashad's favorite word had always been mine. Now it would haunt him in legal print. Odessa leaned closer. "These filings are recorded under your maiden name. It gives you insulation. He can challenge it, but not without exposing his offshore discrepancies. The dates alone would bury him." I swallowed. "Then we're done?" She slid a receipt across. "Done and sealed. Once this posts to the state registry, reversal requires mutual consent." She looked me dead in the eye. "And I'm guessing you won't be giving that." I shook my head. "Never." When I stepped outside, the sun had risen fully, blinding against the glass towers. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not relief, not victory. Control. For once, the paper didn't belong to Rashad's world. It belonged to mine. Deacon was waiting in his car across the street, windows tinted. I didn't wave, didn't need to. I just lifted the stamped document slightly, letting the morning light flash across the seal. He nodded once, then drove off without a word. Back in my purse, my phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. Confirmed. Ledger synchronized. Timestamp, 11:36 a.m. Odessa's words echoed through my mind as I watched the message disappear into the encrypted thread. Never file second. For the first time in years, Rashad Devane was officially behind me, on paper, in time, and in power.
If betrayal had a sound, it would be the steady clink of silverware against porcelain. That night replayed in my mind like a film I didn't audition for. Same table, same smiles, same knife hidden in the script. But this time, I remember everything. The chandelier above us burned too bright, its light catching the edge of Rashad's cufflinks. He'd chosen gold tonight, the color of confidence. Sabria sat opposite me, wearing my mother's earrings, pretending it wasn't symbolic. Hollis, the lawyer, smiled like a man who'd already collected his fee. Langston moved between courses with the quiet rhythm of someone who had seen too much. I caught his glance once, steady, cautious, the same look you'd give a storm before deciding whether to board the windows. The dining room smelled like deceit, disguised as rosemary and butter. Rashad was performing again, voice low, words polished. "You know, Morel," he said, slicing his steak, "when we started Hale Holdings, I never imagined it would grow this fast. I owe much of it to the people at this table." Sabria tilted her glass toward him. "And to the woman beside you," she added sweetly, her tone soaked in false reverence. Rashad grinned, knife flashing in the candlelight. "Of course, my wife's steady support." The pause before steady was long enough to slice air. They laughed, the polite kind that doesn't reach the eyes. I smiled back, a practiced expression I'd perfected over years of swallowing pride. I turned my wine glass slightly, letting the candlelight blur their faces together. Husband, sister, conspirator. That's when I saw it, the reflection of Sabria's hand under the table, turning Rashad's old wedding ring around her finger. Nervously, tenderly, like she knew it didn't fit her yet. My hand tightened around the stem of the glass. I didn't look up. Rage gives you away. Precision saves you. "Darling," Rashad said suddenly, "Hollis has some documents for us to sign, routine adjustments for the new quarter. It's just formalities." "Formalities," I echoed softly. "You love that word." He gestured to Hollis, who opened the leather folder again, the same one I'd already conquered 2 weeks earlier. Only this time, I noticed the faint sheen of Sabria's fingerprints on its corner. She'd handled it. I leaned forward. "Routine, then. Let's not spoil dessert." Hollis hesitated. "Of course, Mrs. Devane." Langston appeared with the next course, a glazed duck breast, aromatic and perfectly sliced. As he leaned over, his sleeve brushed my shoulder. I felt the faintest tap against my wrist. His silent question, "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. Rashad filled the silence. "After tonight, everything will finally be settled." His words were meant to sound casual, but arrogance can't whisper. It always echoes. Sabria forced a smile. "You'll feel lighter, Morel. You've carried so much paperwork over the years." I turned my gaze on her, slowly, deliberately. "Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about you." Her fork froze mid-air. Rashad didn't notice. He was too busy admiring himself in the silver reflection of his wine knife. The papers slid toward me again. Hollis passed me the pen. "Page 3, he said. "Just your initials." I took the pen, steady hand, steady breath. The clock on the far wall ticked loud enough to be heard over the faint jazz drifting from the speakers. I could feel every eye on me. Rashad waiting for submission. Sabria waiting for victory. I signed exactly where they wanted, smiled like I'd meant it, and said softly, "To trust. It's the only thing worth signing." The glasses lifted. The toast echoed. Rashad's laugh came first, full and satisfied. Hollis followed, awkwardly. Sabria raised her glass, but didn't drink. She was staring at my hand. the one that had just signed her disappointment into permanence. Langston brought out the cake then, white frosting, gold flakes, the word forever piped across the top. Rashad reached for the knife, grinning. But I watched Sabria's reflection again. Her thumb traced the ring once more, slower this time. The metal glinted in the candlelight like a warning too late to hear. The next morning, Rashad was dressed before sunrise, tailored navy suit, fresh haircut, confidence reattached. He hummed while adjusting his tie, the way men do when they think they've outsmarted the world. "You'll thank me later," he said, tightening the knot. I watched him through the mirror, the faint reflection of a man rearranging his mask. "Where are you off to so early?" I asked, pretending to care. "Just tying up loose ends. Hollis wants my signature on the registry filing. Routine follow-up." Routine. Always that word. By the time the elevator doors closed, I was already on my phone. No messages from Deacon, none from Odessa. The silence meant everything was still in motion, quiet, sealed, untouchable. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the city stretch awake below. Every skyscraper shimmered like a stack of papers waiting to be signed. Across town, Hollis Gray's office buzzed with the low hum of printers and the nervous rhythm of paralegals trying to look confident. On the fourth floor, Rico Maddox, the youngest, the one who always double-checked everything, was scanning the morning's filings. His desk was buried with red folders stamped with Hale Holdings logo. He opened the Devane file expecting monotony, but something caught his eye. Registry code 2204AX, 9, typed twice, once under transfer of beneficial ownership and again under reassignment of trust management. 2 different dates, 2 different timestamps. "Rico," Hollis barked from his office, "run the authorization packet to the clerk's desk." "Yes, sir," he said quickly, printing the forms. But his eyes lingered on those timestamps, one from Rashad's dinner night, another from nearly 2 weeks earlier. The earlier one carried Morell's maiden name. He hesitated, then opened the state database to cross-check filings. His pulse jumped when he saw it. Hale Legacy Trust, irrevocable, already recorded and verified. "Sir," he said carefully, knocking on Hollis's door, "these codes, something looks off." Hollis waved a dismissive hand. "The registry never syncs in real time. Submit it, Rico. We have a client meeting in 30. Rico nodded, but he couldn't let it go. After the files were uploaded, he hovered at his desk, watching the confirmation banner spin on screen. Pending verification. Then a red flag blinked. Duplicate entry detected. He froze. Hollis walked by, phone pressed to his ear, too distracted to notice. When the office finally emptied for lunch, Rico printed the verification log, folded it twice, and slipped it into his backpack. His conscience weighed more than his paycheck. That evening, I received an anonymous email to my private inbox, the one only Deacon and Odessa knew about. No greeting, no signature, just a subject line that read, "You filed first." My pulse quickened. The message body was almost blank except for a single line. Registry code 2204-AX9 appears twice. The earlier filing is untouchable. Protect your copy. No attachments, no traceable address. The email deleted itself a minute later, but that was enough. Rashad came one that night smug and satisfied. He tossed his jacket on the couch and kissed the air near my cheek. "Filed and done," he said, pouring himself a drink. "We're officially streamlined." "Congratulations," I said evenly. "That must feel final." He raised his glass. "To trust," he said mockingly, "and good lawyers." I smiled faintly. "To paperwork, then, the only thing that ever tells the truth." He didn't notice the irony. He never did. After he went to bed, I opened my laptop and checked the registry portal using Odessa's credentials, something she'd quietly shared after our meeting. There it was, time-stamped in blue, unchangeable. Hale Legacy Trust, filed by Morel E. Devane, 2 weeks before Rashad's fraudulent submission. I exhaled slowly, tracing the date with my fingertip like a scar I could finally stop hiding. Somewhere in that same digital archive, Rico Maddox was watching the system logs refresh, praying no one traced the anomaly back to him. The next day, Hollis would learn the truth the hard way, but for now, I closed the laptop, leaned back, and whispered into the dark, "You filed first, Rashad, but I filed right." Paranoia has a smell, cold metal, burnt coffee, and sweat under expensive cologne. For weeks after the filing, that's how Rashad carried himself. He no longer whistled in the mornings or answered his phone on speaker. Every conversation became a whisper, every door half closed. I watched the shift quietly, never asking questions. Silence, when used right, becomes its own kind of power. By late March, the staff began to notice too. Langston told me the housekeepers were whispering in the kitchen, wondering why Rashad started checking the locks after midnight or deleting emails himself. He'd never touched his own inbox before. At first, I thought it was guilt wearing him down, but guilt implies conscience, and Rashad had none. What ate at him was uncertainty, the itch that comes when a man's lie starts sweating under light. That light came from Elise Trenton. Elise had covered our charity galas for years, a lifestyle journalist with a camera-friendly smile and a habit of asking questions that sounded harmless until you realized she'd already done her homework. She'd once told me over champagne, "People hide truth in tone, not words." I never forgot that. 2 weeks after the dinner, she called me out of the blue. "Morel, darling," she said, voice honeyed, "I'm doing a feature on legacy estates and generational wealth. Hale Holdings is the crown jewel. Mind if I drop by for a quote?" I heard the unspoken question behind her charm. "What's happening between you two?" "Of course," I said lightly. "Rashad loves publicity. Bring your recorder." She laughed softly. "I was hoping you'd say that." When she arrived, Rashad was still at a board meeting. I walked her through the garden, the one he'd always claimed to design himself, though a landscaper named Josephine had done all the work. Elise admired the marble fountain, then asked, "Who holds the estate now? Still under the same management structure?" I tilted my head. "What makes you ask that?" She shrugged. "A colleague at the property registry mentioned duplicate filings, probably just bureaucracy, but in journalism, patterns matter." I smiled. "Patterns do matter. So do dates." Elise studied my face. "Then I'll be careful about which one I print." Inside, Rashad's voice echoed as he entered the foyer. "Elise, didn't know we had an appointment." She turned, all warmth. "Rashad, always a pleasure. You're glowing. Success looks good on you." He laughed too loud, pulling her into a quick photo-ready hug. "We're in the middle of some restructuring, routine stuff." Elise nodded. "Of course. Just to confirm, Hale Holdings and Hale Legacy Trust, same umbrella?" The color drained slightly from his face, but he recovered with a practiced grin. "One and the same." "Perfect," she said, switching off her recorder. "That's all I needed." After she left, Rashad spun on me. "Did you tell her to ask that?" I feigned confusion. "Ask what?" "The trust. Who mentioned a trust to her?" "I don't even know what she's talking about." His eyes searched mine, but he couldn't find what wasn't there. I'd learned to blink truthfully while lying. That evening, I caught him pacing the study, phone to his ear. "No, Hollis, just verify the filings. Again, someone's leaking. I don't care who. Find out." His voice cracked at the edge, a rare fracture in his usual composure. I listened from the hallway, unseen, sipping tea I didn't even like. The sound of fear in his tone was better than sugar. The next morning, Elise sent me a photo of her laptop screen, a draft headline glowing at the top of her article. "The estate with 2 owners." No caption, no explanation,
just that. My reply was simple: make sure you spell the names right. And that's when I realized something vital. The transfer wasn't just filed, it was breathing. It had started to whisper into the world, and Rashad could already hear its echo. When the headlines finally came, they didn't feel like victory. They felt like thunder you could see coming but not stop. For weeks, the Wispins had been crawling through boardrooms and private lounges. Hale Holdings wasn't stable. Investors were pulling quiet inquiries. Contracts paused mid-signature. But Rashad still strutted through it all, talking in half-truths and full ego. Until the morning he walked into his own boardroom and found Deacon Vance sitting at the head of the table. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day power likes to pretend it can own. The board had called an emergency meeting to address management concerns. Rashad assumed it was about liquidity. He brought Hollis along, loud and smug, carrying binders he didn't need. When the doors closed, the room was heavy with fluorescent light and expensive silence. Deacon rose calmly, buttoning his jacket. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice even, "effective immediately, I've been appointed interim chair of Hale Holdings, pending review of updated ownership documents." Rashad blinked. "You've been what?" "Appointed," Deacon repeated, handing out certified copies of the registry verification Odessa had stamped. "Filed 2 weeks before your submission, Rashad. The board has verified it." The other members glanced nervously between them. Quentin Ash, the most careful of them all, avoided Rashad's stare and kept his eyes on the table. Rashad's face darkened. "This is a setup," he spat. "No one transfers holdings without my consent." Deacon's tone never rose. "Your wife did. Legally. The filings are airtight. I've reviewed them myself." "You?" Rashad laughed bitterly. "You're a numbers man, not a strategist. You've always needed me." He slid his phone across the table. On the screen, a document glowed with Hale Legacy Trust seal and Rashad's own signature from years ago. A blanket power of attorney clause he'd once signed for convenience. "Apparently, you gave everyone what they needed," Deacon said. The room stayed still. Even Hollis went quiet, flipping through his notes as if looking for a version of reality that would save him. Rashad's hand twitched toward his glass of water, but stopped halfway. "You've been plotting with her," Deacon said smoothly. "I've been protecting the company." "You were too distracted to notice." Rashad slammed his palm on the table, papers fluttering. "This is theft." Deacon met his eyes without flinching. "This is paperwork." Across the table, Quentin Ash's phone buzzed once, then again. He slipped it into his pocket, his expression unreadable. After the meeting dissolved in strained silence, Rashad stormed out shouting at Hollis, "Fix it! I don't care how!" His voice echoed down the marble hallway like a warning no one planned to heed. But Quentin didn't go home. He went straight to his car, opened his recorder app, and uploaded the last 10 minutes of Rashad's voicemail tirades, the ones where Rashad threatened staff, berated investors, and swore revenge. By evening, those audio files landed in Elise Trenton's inbox. The next morning, her column dropped online at 7:02 a.m. The headline stretched across all screens in gold serif font. "Devane Empire changes hands." Underneath, a smaller caption. "Inside the power shift that silenced a king and crowned his shadow." I read it from my kitchen counter, coffee cooling beside me. Rashad hadn't come home. The city was already buzzing. Reporters camped outside the Hale Holdings building. Investors issued polite statements about transitional leadership. My phone buzzed once. Deacon's text. They wanted a leader. Now they have one. No emojis, no pretense, just that. I looked out at the skyline, my reflection caught in the glass. The power Rashad once worshipped was no longer his, and he hadn't even noticed the dead left. It was still on paper. Only now that paper carried Deacon's signature where Rashad's arrogance used to live. Somewhere between scandal and silence, the empire had cracked, and the sound was beautiful. There's a special kind of arrogance that comes before a fall, loud, glittering, and deafening. Sabria wore it like perfume. In the weeks following Elisa's visit, she moved through the city as if the world had finally recognized her. She began showing up in public wearing designer pieces Rashad once said were too bold for Morel. Her wrists jingled with new diamonds. Her laughter echoed louder. Every photo she posted had the same caption, "New chapter, same queen." I didn't follow her, but people sent me everything. Screenshots, gossip column blurbs, even a clip of her walking out of a luxury dealership on Peachtree, holding keys that weren't hers yet. Rashad must have promised the estate was nearly hers, that I was as good as erased. The first direct insult came on a Tuesday morning. I was in my office reviewing invoices when my phone rang. The voice on the line was cheerful, male, and expensive. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Devane. This is Randall from Mayfair Motors. I'm calling to confirm authorization for a new Rolls-Royce Ghost registered under Sabria Devane." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "I'm sorry, who?" "Sabria Devane," he repeated carefully. "We have her listed as co-owner of the Hale Legacy Estate and joint beneficiary of the accompanying trust. Standard policy requires the secondary owner's approval for all vehicle registrations attached to that address." He paused, probably waiting for the confusion to set in. It didn't. "Ah, yes," I said calmly. "The address is correct, but the ownership status isn't." "I see," he said uncertainly. "She was quite insistent. She said her husband, she doesn't have one. At least not one who can afford that car." Silence. I lowered my tone, the way Rashad used to when he wanted to sound in control. "Mark the request as declined. Ownership pending verification." He hesitated. "Should I note a reason, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Fraudulent optimism." I hung up before he could stammer through the rest. Half an hour later, Rashad stormed into my office, holding his phone. "What the hell did you say to Mayfair Motors?" I looked up from my paperwork. "Good morning to you, too." "Don't play coy, Morel. You embarrassed me." His voice was a low growl. "You had no right interfering." "I didn't interfere," I said softly. "They called me." He froze. "Why would they call you?" "Because the house, the estate, and the trust are still registered under my authorization." I met his gaze. "That must sting, doesn't it?" For a brief moment, I saw something unfamiliar in his eyes. Confusion. The kind that comes when a man realizes the ground beneath him isn't his anymore. Later that evening, Sabria called. No greeting, just fury. "What game are you playing, Morel? That car was a gift." "I'm sure it was," I said. "You've always loved taking what wasn't yours." "You think you've won?" she hissed. "He told me everything's finalized. You're just a technicality now." I laughed softly. "Then tell him to check the registry himself." Her breathing sharpened. "You really think paperwork can save you?" "It already did." I hung up. By nightfall, the story was everywhere. A gossip site ran a photo of Sabria outside the dealership, clutching her purse as if it could shield her from embarrassment. The headline read, "Devane Mistress Denied Luxury Vehicle Amid Legal Dispute." Rashad didn't come home that night. I imagined him pacing Hollis's office, demanding answers that no one could give. Somewhere, Elise was typing faster than ever. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the city lights pulse like slow lightning. The air outside was clean, rain-soaked and honest. For the first time in years, my name wasn't being erased. It was being whispered in rooms Rashad could no longer enter. Sabria wanted to taste my life. She didn't realize she'd just bitten into paper, ink and iron. The registry wasn't built for drama. It was built for silence. Rows of cold computers, the hum of printers and fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty. But that morning, Odessa Brink sat at her desk like a quiet judge, already knowing a storm was walking through her glass doors. At 9:17 a.m., Rashad Devaine's lawyer, Hollis Gray, entered the office with his usual arrogance, tie straight, voice crisp, ego first. Two assistants followed, each clutching a red folder labeled Hale Holdings Transfer of Beneficial Ownership. He didn't greet anyone. He never did. "Good morning, Mrs. Brink." He flashed credentials she didn't ask for. "I need expedited verification on our client's filing. There's been some confusion with the registry database." Odessa looked up slowly, adjusting her glasses. "Confusion," she repeated. "That's rare here. We timestamp everything." Hollis smiled tightly. "Then this should be simple." He placed the folder on her desk like a verdict already written. Odessa opened it, flipped through the notarized pages, and made a small sound, something between a hum and a sigh. "Mrs. Devane signed these during dinner," Hollis said, voice edged with confidence. "We just need confirmation that her consent was filed properly." Odessa didn't answer right away. She reached for her keyboard, typed in a few commands, and pulled up the digital ledger. On the monitor, two records blinked under the same ownership code, 2204-AX9. One under Hale Holdings, the other under Hale Legacy Trust, under Escopio. She turned the screen slightly toward him. "You said routine, Mr. Gray?" "Yes." She tapped her pen against the desk. "Then why does your client's submission carry a timestamp of March 14th at 8:03 p.m., while this one," she pointed to the second line, "was filed March 1st at 10:41 a.m.? Hollis's mouth tightened. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," Odessa said evenly. "I'm reading." She clicked twice, and the screen expanded. Both documents appeared side by side, identical in structure but not in origin. Rashad's version named Sabria Lyle as the new beneficiary. The earlier one, mine, listed Hale Legacy Trust, irrevocable, signed and sealed under my maiden name, Morel Devane. Hollis shifted his weight. "That can't be valid. She filed under a different entity without her husband's consent." Odessa leaned back, unimpressed. "She filed under a separate authority, yes. Her name appears as managing member of the holding company. That grants her unilateral rights. She can't—" "She did." Her tone cut through the hum of the machines. Around them, clerks slowed their typing, sensing the gravity of quiet warfare. Odessa turned the monitor back toward herself, then printed both filings. The machine spat out the pages, each marked with a faint blue watermark. She laid them flat under the harsh light, aligning them like pieces of evidence in a trial. "Here," she said, pushing them forward. 2 filings, 2 signatures, 2 weeks apart. Hollis scanned the papers, his finger tracing the earlier date. "March 1st, he swallowed. "That's impossible." "Nothing's impossible," murmured Odessa. "Just inconvenient." He tried again, voice lower. "Who authorized this? Who processed her submission?" "I did," she said simply. "And I remember her father." Hollis blinked. "Her father?" "Yes, he used to tell me, 'Never file second.'" The silence stretched. For a first time, Hollis's posture slipped. The assistants looked at him, waiting for direction, but he said nothing. His confidence had drained out quietly, like ink bleeding from a pen. "Would you like a certified copy?" Odessa asked. He hesitated, jaw tight. "No, that won't be necessary." "Suit yourself," she said, stamping the corner of both documents with a heavy thud. The sound echoed through the registry like a closing door. As he gathered his folders, one of the assistants whispered, "What do we tell him?" Hollis didn't look back. He said, "Tell him she beat us by 2 weeks." Odessa watched them leave,
then turned off her monitor. The fluorescent lights flickered once before steadying. She allowed herself a small, private smile, the kind that doesn't show triumph, only respect for a woman who'd learned to fight with ink instead of noise.
When the headlines finally came, they didn't feel like victory. They felt like thunder you could see coming but not stop. For weeks, the whispers had been crawling through boardrooms and private lounges. Hale Holdings wasn't stable. Investors were pulling quiet inquiries. Contracts paused mid-signature. But Rashad still strutted through it all, talking in half-truths and full ego. Until the morning he walked into his own boardroom and found Deacon Vance sitting at the head of the table. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day power likes to pretend it can own. The board had called an emergency meeting to address management concerns. Rashad assumed it was about liquidity. He brought Hollis along, loud and smug, carrying binders he didn't need. When the doors closed, the room was heavy with fluorescent light and expensive silence. Deacon rose calmly, buttoning his jacket. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice even, "effective immediately, I've been appointed interim chair of Hale Holdings, pending review of updated ownership documents." Rashad blinked. "You've been what?" "Appointed," Deacon repeated, handing out certified copies of the registry verification Odessa had stamped. "Filed 2 weeks before your submission, Rashad. The board has verified it." The other members glanced nervously between them. Quentin Ash, the most careful of them all, avoided Rashad's stare and kept his eyes on the table. Rashad's face darkened. "This is a setup," he spat. "No one transfers holdings without my consent." Deacon's tone never rose. "Your wife did. Legally. The filings are airtight. I have reviewed them myself." "You?" Rashad laughed bitterly. "You're a numbers man, not a strategist. You've always needed me." Deacon slid his phone across the table. On the screen, a document glowed with Hale Legacy Trust's seal and Rashad's own signature from years ago, a blanket power of attorney clause he'd once signed for convenience. "Apparently," Deacon said, "you gave everyone what they needed." The room stayed still. Even Hollis went quiet, flipping through his notes as if looking for a version of reality that would save him. Rashad's hand twitched toward his glass of water, but stopped halfway. "You've been plotting with her." Deacon said, "I've been protecting the company. You were too distracted to notice." Rashad slammed his palm on the table, papers fluttering. "This is theft." Deacon met his eyes without flinching. "This is paperwork." Across the table, Quentin Ash's phone buzzed once, then again. He slipped it into his pocket, his expression unreadable. After the meeting dissolved in strained silence, Rashad stormed out, shouting at Hollis, "Fix it. I don't care how." His voice echoed down the marble hallway like a warning no one planned to heed. But Quentin didn't go home. He went straight to his car, opened his recorder app, and uploaded the last 10 minutes of Rashad's voicemail tirades, the ones where Rashad threatened staff, berated investors, and swore revenge. By evening, those audio files landed in Elise Trenton's inbox. The next morning, her column dropped online at 7:02 a.m. The headline stretched across every screen in gold serif font. Devane Empire changes hands. Underneath, a smaller caption. Inside the power shift that silenced a king and crowned his shadow. I read it from my kitchen counter, coffee cooling beside me. Rashad hadn't come home. The city was already buzzing. Reporters camped outside the Hale Holdings building. Investors issued polite statements about transitional leadership. My phone buzzed once. Deacon's text. They wanted a leader. Now they have one. No emojis, no pretense. Just that. I looked out at the skyline, my reflection caught in the glass. The power Rashad once worshipped was no longer his, and he hadn't even noticed the day it left. It was still on paper, only now that paper carried Deacon's signature where Rashad's arrogance used to live. Somewhere, between scandal and silence, the empire had cracked, and the sound was beautiful. When pride starts drowning, it grabs whatever's closest. For Rashad, that meant the courts. By the end of that same week, he filed an emergency injunction claiming I had frauded him, forged documents, and colluded with outside parties to unlawfully seize joint marital assets. I read the petition online before the papers even reached my door. The irony almost made me laugh. He'd built his empire on manipulation, and now he was crying theft. The hearing was scheduled within 48 hours. Speed in law is panic disguised as urgency. Hollis Gray, now my attorney, called that evening. His voice was calm, efficient, a man who had seen too many husbands lose quietly. "He's demanding full asset freeze," Hollis said. "He wants Hale Holdings under judicial supervision until ownership is clarified." "Let him want," I said. Hollis exhaled softly. "We'll fight it, but this will get loud, Morel. Are you ready for that?" I stopped caring about volume the day he started whispering lies. Courtrooms have a smell too. Wood polish, fear, and perfume that's trying too hard. When I walked in, Rashad was already seated with his new legal team, expensive and humorless. Deacon sat behind me, unreadable as always. The spectators were mostly journalists, their pens poised like scalpels. Judge Linnell Carter presided, gray suit, firm posture, no nonsense. She adjusted her glasses as Rashad's attorney began his performance. "Your Honor," he said, "our client's signature was obtained under misleading pretenses. Mrs. Devane and Mr. Vance executed a hostile restructuring that stripped my client of his rightful property, an estate valued at $80 million. He made it sound like a heist instead of paperwork." I kept my face still. When Hollis's turn came, he didn't waste time defending my character. He went straight for the kill. "Your Honor," he began, 10 years ago, during Mr. Devane's overseas expansion, he signed a comprehensive power of attorney granting Mrs. Devane unilateral authority over all Hale Holdings transactions in his absence. That document was never revoked. He placed a worn file on the bench. The paper was yellowed at the edges, sealed, notarized. Judge Carter leaned forward. "You're saying she had legal power to act independently?" "Yes, ma'am," Hollis said. "We have the original, signed by Mr. Devane himself, witnessed by his former financial director." Rashad's lawyer jumped up. "Objection! Irrelevant! The document predates." "Overruled," Judge Carter said. "Continue." Hollis approached the bench. "This isn't about dates. It's about authority that was never limited. The power of attorney states," he paused, unfolding the final page, "authority, unlimited and ongoing." The room still. Even the reporters stopped typing. Judge Carter took the document, reading it herself, lips moving silently before she looked up at Rashad. "Mr. Devane, did you sign this?" Rashad shifted in his seat. "It was for travel convenience. It wasn't meant to—" "To what?" the judge asked. "To grant her exactly the authority you now claim she abused?" He started to speak again, but his lawyer pulled his sleeve gently. The damage was done. Judge Carter tapped her pen twice. "The motion for emergency injunction is denied. The trust stands as filed. If you wish to pursue fraud allegations, you may do so through civil channels, not this courtroom."
Rashad sat frozen, his jaw flexing. Hollis simply nodded, gathered his papers, and whispered, "We're done here." As we left, the hallway was buzzing. A reporter shoved a microphone toward me. "Mrs. Devane, do you have a statement?" I smiled faintly. "Only that my husband taught me paperwork matters." Deacon opened the door for me without a word. Outside, the sky hung gray and heavy, the kind that feels like it's waiting to rain. Rashad followed a few steps behind, calling my name once, voice sharp with disbelief. I didn't turn around. Some people deserve silence more than answers. When I reached the car, Hollis handed me a copy of the ruling. Across the margin, Judge Carter had underlined one phrase in blue ink: authority, unlimited and ongoing. For the first time, I believed it. Scandals don't break, they bleed. Slow at first, then all at once. 3 days after the hearing, Rashad tried to reclaim his power the only way he knew how, by pretending nothing had changed. He appeared at luncheons, forced smiles for cameras, and released a statement about misunderstandings between trusted parties. But his voice on screen was brittle, his eyes darting like a man rehearsing sincerity.
I didn't need to answer him in court anymore. I had other tools now. Truth, timing, and a journalist who owed me nothing, but respected the art of precision. Elise Trenton called the next morning. Her tone was calm, but I could hear excitement crackling beneath it. Morel, I'm sending something to your private inbox. You'll want to see it before I go public. Within seconds, the email arrived. 6 photographs, clean and unforgiving. Rashad and Sabria, sun-drunk and shameless at a Caribbean villa. In one, he was holding her hand on a balcony. In another, they were laughing beside a private pool. But it was the third photo that ended everything. Rashad kissing her shoulder, wedding ring glinting in full view, Sabria wearing a silk robe embroidered with Hale Legacy Retreat, the logo from our estate's hospitality branch. Attached beneath the photos was Elise's draft article. Headline: The Sister Estate, Inside Rashad Devane's Double Life. I stared at the title for a long moment. It was perfect, poetic, damning, and true. Elise called again. Her tone was calm, but I could hear excitement crackling beneath it. Morel, I'm sending something to your private inbox. You'll want to see it before I go public. Elise called again. Her tone was calm, but I could hear excitement crackling beneath it. Morel, I'm sending something to your private inbox. You'll want to see it before I go public. I said, no. Let it breathe on its own. When the story hit at midnight, the internet exploded before morning. Hashtags flooded every platform. Hashtag Sister Estate. Hashtag Devane Double. Hashtag Family Assets. Within hours, it became a trending topic nationwide. Every major outlet picked it up. Rashad's PR team went silent. His company's official page disabled comments, but the screenshots multiplied like wildfire. Even the foundation's donors began withdrawing support. At 9 a.m., my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Some messages were from acquaintances, feigning shock. Others were from investors who suddenly remembered I existed. But the one that mattered came from an unknown number. I hope you're proud of this circus. I replied, I didn't start the circus. I just turned on the lights. He called immediately, voice sharp, pleading beneath the rage. You think this wins you anything? You've humiliated yourself too. They'll drag you down with me. No, I said quietly. They're not looking at me. They're looking at the ring on your hand and the robe on hers. He cursed under his breath. You're going to regret this. I already did. And ended the call. By noon, cable news had picked it up. A panel of analysts debated whether the affair jeopardized Hale Holdings' reputation. They spoke in careful tones, calling it a corporate betrayal of extraordinary irony. One anchor said, It's not just a marriage scandal, it's a business implosion. The footage looped endlessly. Rashad's smile in the villa, Sabria's careless tilt of the head, both caught in paradise turned prison. Elise texted mid-afternoon. Every outlet's confirming your filings now. They're calling it the smartest preemptive move in years. I responded simply, Truth is good business. That evening, I stood on the balcony of the mansion, my mansion, and looked out at the city below. Reporters gathered at the gate, camera flashes flickering like lightning bugs. Somewhere, Sabria was hiding behind closed curtains, realizing Rashad couldn't save her. Langston brought me tea, hesitant. You did what you had to, ma'am, he said softly. I nodded. No, Langston. I did what he taught me. Control the narrative before it controls you. On social media, the hashtag Sister Estate hit 1 million mentions by midnight, and as the world dissected their betrayal, I slept for the first time in months. Not peacefully, just honestly, because finally, Everyone could see what I'd known all along. Rashad built his empire on deceit, and I buried it with proof. Empires don't crumble in explosions. They collapse in murmurs, emails unanswered, calls declined, handshakes withdrawn. That's how Rashad Devane fell. Quietly, then all at once. After Elisa's expose, Hale Holdings bled investors faster than any press release could patch. By the end of the week, 2 major partners withdrew funding, citing reputational concerns. The board pretended it was temporary, but I knew better. Money doesn't forgive embarrassment. Deacon ran the office like a surgeon. Precise, detached, focused. He cut the infected parts first. Rashad's loyalists, his old accountants, his shadow consultants. In their place came silence and efficiency. Meanwhile, Rashad made the rounds on television, denying everything. My wife, he said in interviews, has been manipulated by forces within my own company. These filings are invalid. But his voice betrayed him. Each sentence a tremor. The public wasn't buying it. Neither were the banks.
By Friday morning, creditors started calling. Interest rates on the company's revolving loans doubled overnight. Accounts froze. A private memo leaked from the finance division. Cash flow emergency. Hale Holdings operating in deficit. I read the memo at my breakfast table, sipping coffee slowly, savoring every line. The word deficit looked good on him. Then came the video. Langston had always kept things, recipes, notes, memories. Apparently, he'd also kept recordings. That night, without telling me, he uploaded a 5-minute audio clip to social media, a conversation from 2 years earlier, recorded after a charity event. Rashad's voice filled the speakers, sharp and venomous. "Do your job right, Langston, or I'll replace every one of you. You think loyalty feeds you? I own your loyalty." Then laughter, his, cold and confident. By dawn, the clip had gone viral. Over 2 million views before breakfast. The comments shredded what little reputation he had left. #TyrantChef, #DevaneDemands, and of course, #SisterEstate. When I found Langston in the kitchen, he looked uneasy. "I didn't mean for it to spread so fast," he said. "I just thought people should know." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Truth moves at its own speed, Langston. Don't apologize for that." By noon, Hale Holdings stock had dropped 19%. The board issued a statement reassuring shareholders that new leadership was maintaining stability. Deacon's signature appeared at the bottom. Rashad's name was nowhere on it. He must have seen it, because at 3:46 p.m., security cameras caught him pulling up to the Hale Holdings headquarters in his silver Bentley, tires screeching. He tried to storm through the front entrance, shouting at the guards. "I built this company," he yelled. "You can't keep me out." But the guards didn't move. Their orders were clear. His key card was already deactivated. A crowd formed outside, reporters, onlookers, employees pretending to be on break. Rashad pounded on the glass doors, fury twisting his face. Cameras flashed, capturing every second. "Sir," one guard said through the intercom, "you're no longer authorized to enter the premises. Please step back." He didn't. Instead, he kicked the door. The sound echoed, sharp and hollow. That image, Rashad Devane, the man who once treated entire boardrooms like his living room, locked out of his own empire, was all the internet needed. By evening, the footage led every network broadcast. Elisa's column updated its headline, "Devane denied, former CEO barred from his own building." I watched the clip from home, the same glass of wine I'd been nursing all week, catching the reflection of his downfall. Deacon called once, his voice low. "It's over." "No," I said quietly. "It's documented." Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Fitting, I thought. Paperwork had begun this war. Now the storm would write the final paragraph. For years, Rashad told people he was the gatekeeper of our success. Now he was just a man standing outside the gate, pounding on glass that would never open again. By the time Rashad came back to the mansion, the air had changed. The place no longer sounded like him. No echo of his laughter, no smell of his cologne woven through the marble halls. It was mine again, stripped clean of the noise he'd brought with it. I knew he'd come eventually. Pride always returns to the scene of its own crime. The gates opened just long enough for his car to slip through before security locked them behind him. He didn't knock. He never did. The front door swung open, and there he was, disheveled, hollow-eyed, still trying to look powerful. The storm outside followed him in, thunder at his back. "Where is he?" Rashad barked, voice echoing through the foyer. "Upstairs," I said evenly. "He's been waiting for you." He froze, thrown by the calm. "You think this is finished? You think you can embarrass me, destroy me, and I'll just walk away?" I stepped aside as Deacon descended the staircase. His movements were quiet, deliberate. He didn't look like a man walking into conflict. He looked like someone walking into confirmation. "Rashad," Deacon said softly, "you should sit." Rashad laughed bitterly. You were supposed to be my friend." His expression didn't change. "I was your balance sheet. You just never checked the numbers." "You think you can replace me?" he spat, stepping forward. "You think the world won't see what this is? My wife sleeping with my closest friend to steal my company?" I didn't flinch. "I didn't steal your company, Rashad. I audited it." His jaw tightened. "You set me up." "No," I said. "You set yourself up the moment you trusted your greed more than your own handwriting." From the corner of the room, the faint wail of sirens began to swell, distant but growing louder. Rashad's head turned toward the sound. "What is that?" he demanded. Deacon took a step closer. "That's accountability. It's been trying to reach you. For years." Outside, blue lights began to splash across the windows. The security intercom buzzed. One of the guards' voices came through. "Mrs. Devane, police are at the gate. They have a warrant for Mr. Devane." Rashad's face drained of color. "What?" I tilted my head slightly. "For financial misconduct, offshore accounts, Cayman Holdings under shell corporations, Lionfish Investments, wasn't it?" He blinked, stunned. "How do you know about that?" Deacon folded his hands. "Because your wife is meticulous." Rashad looked between us, realization dawning too late. "The flash drive," he whispered. I just borrowed your records. You should be proud, Rashad. They were perfectly organized." The intercom buzzed again. "Mrs. Devane, should we let them in?" "Yes," I said quietly. "They know exactly who they're here for." Rashad backed away, voice cracking. "You can't do this. This is my house." I walked toward him slowly, each step echoing like a gavel. "No, Rashad. The house recognizes its rightful name. It's not yours." Outside, engines idled. Officers moved toward the front doors. Through the glass, I saw the reflection of their lights painting the marble floor in blue and red. Rashad turned toward me, fury and fear wrestling behind his eyes. "You think this makes you noble," he hissed. "You're just like me." "Maybe," I said, "but the difference is, I know what I am." The front doors opened, rain spilling in as two officers stepped forward. "Mr. Devane, you're under arrest for financial misconduct, wire fraud, and perjury under oath." Rashad didn't resist. He just looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. There was no love left, no hate either, just the hollow face of a man who finally met the truth he'd spent his life avoiding. As they led him out, lightning flared across the room. For a moment, the reflection of his cuffed hands flashed against the glass of the grand piano he'd once bragged about importing from Milan. Deacon stood beside me, silent. When the doors closed behind Rashad, the mansion went still again. Only the rain spoke. 1 year later, the gates opened again, but this time not for police or lawyers or fury. This time, they opened for legacy. The mansion had been transformed. Gone were the portraits Rashad once hung of himself in boardrooms and hallways. In their place stood art from local Black artists, pieces commissioned through the Hale Legacy Trust, a foundation born out of paperwork and war. The same estate he tried to steal was now funding scholarships, creative grants, and community initiatives. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all me. The launch event drew a modest but deliberate crowd. Deacon stood at the podium first, immaculate as ever, his voice carrying calm authority. Today marks not the end of an empire, but the beginning of something honest. This trust stands on restored ground, owned, not borrowed. Cameras click softly, the sound like rain on glass. Elise Trenton, now hosting a live broadcast, moved through the audience, her voice smooth as velvet. We're here at the official unveiling of the Hale Legacy Trust, an institution founded by Morelle Devane, the woman whose resilience reshaped what power looks like in modern business. Her phrasing made me smile. Power didn't change, it just changed owners. At the front row sat Odessa Brink, hair neatly pinned, expression composed. She looked uncomfortable with the tension, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When the moderator called her name, the audience applauded as she rose to accept the plaque. For integrity and record-keeping and service to truth, we recognize Registrar Odessa Brink, whose diligence safeguarded this foundation's creation. Odessa bowed her head slightly. I just stamped the truth, she said into the microphone. She's the one who lived it. Then she looked directly at me. Your father was right, Morelle. Never foul second. The applause swelled again. Deacon joined me off stage a few minutes later, handing me a glass of champagne. He said, You're quiet. I'm remembering. Still no forgiveness? I looked around, the guests mingling, the music low and careful, the cameras capturing the birth of a legacy carved out of betrayal. I said, Forgiveness is for peace. I chose accuracy. He nodded once, understanding. Deacon never asked for more than what I was willing to give. That's what made him dangerous and safe all at once. Outside the gates, beyond the manicured hedges and bright banners, a lone figure stood by the sidewalk. I saw him through the reflection in the glass doors. Rashad. His suit was wrinkled now, his face older. The headlines had eaten him alive. Fraud, bankruptcy, pending charges, silent allies who vanished overnight. He'd sold his cars, lost his board seats, and was living on favors from men who used to fear him. He didn't try to come in. He just watched. Maybe he wanted to see what his name had become. Maybe he wanted proof that the world still remembered him. Elise noticed too. Her camera crew shifted slightly, but she raised her hand, signaling them to hold their lens steady on the stage, not the street. For the first time, someone denied Rashad the attention he always demanded. The event ended at sunset. The golden light spilled across the marble foyer, soft and warm. Guests filtered out slowly, laughter fading into the evening. When the gates closed, Rashad was gone. No note, no noise, just absence. I walked through the hall one last time, past Odessa's plaque, past the portraits of children funded by the trust, past the mirror where I once watched myself sign away what I never truly lost. Outside, the garden lights flickered on, steady, patient. I stood beneath the archway of the home that finally breathed like mine. He tried to make betrayal a weapon. I made it his inheritance. I poured the last of the champagne into the fountain, letting it mingle with the water that once reflected his empire. Then I whispered what I should have said long ago. He thought betrayal was his weapon. I made it his inheritance.